guys, welcome back to Francesca's Books. I'm Francesca and these are my pride and joy, aka my books. If you clicked on this video, you already know we're going to be talking thriller books today, and these are the 10 that you absolutely have to read this year. They're a combination of Kindle books and paperback books, and they're also a combination of like over the years, however many I've read. They're not necessarily my top 10 favourite books, but just the 10 that I absolutely wholeheartedly recommend. So I've picked these books for being like the most engaging, the most entertaining, and like just the most gripping thrillers that I can recommend to you. They're just books that I can pretty much guarantee everybody's gonna love. So I have 7 physical books and 3 Kindle books that I'm going to share with you. So these are in no particular order, it's not like they're ranks or anything, but I am going to start with one that I've read really recently because it's still fresh in my mind and I just absolutely loved it. So I read this one on Kindle and it is The Last Passenger by Will Dean. This book was literally one of the most unique stories I've ever read. Like reading thriller books, you kind of fall into a bit of a pattern, especially in psychological and like domestic thrillers, but this one was just insane. So it follows our female main character Kaz, and she goes on this really expensive cruise ship. It's leaving Ireland and it sets sail for New York. She wakes up after like the first night, so very first day, and she's the only person on the cruise ship. Literally. So she like gets up and just starts to wander around and she's like, what has happened here? That happens within the first like 10 or 15 pages, and I'm not going to say any more because this book just took twists that I just never thought were even possible. Like you kind of have your theories from the beginning, like even hearing the concept you're probably thinking, oh, maybe this, but I would never ever have guessed this. It just took so many unexpected turns, and then even with the kind of direction it was going, it just then like turned again, and yeah, I just absolutely loved it. This one really kept me on my toes. This book was an immediate 5-star for me, and I also just cannot believe that it was written by the same author as, what is it again? See, I can't even remember the name. The Last Thing to Burn by Will Dean, and then The Last Passenger by Will Dean, same author, and they're so different. I mean, it kind of just shows how authors can write in different genres, because although The Last Thing to Burn was classed as a thriller, it's definitely not a thriller. It's like a contemporary suspense book. There's no plot twists, it's more of like a character-driven narrative, whereas this is really plot-based. Next up is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. This is one of my favourite Riley Sager books of all time, however it isn't the only book to make this list. So this follows a widowed actress called Casey, and she goes to a lake to get a bit of headspace, a bit of like vacation time, and she meets another actress who's also vacationing at the lake, and then they befriend each other. They kind of start to like go to each other's for like wine nights and things, and then the next thing she completely just goes missing. Like no texts, no calls, and Casey starts to get very suspicious. When I finished this book, I saw so many reviews of people that absolutely loved it 5-star, and so many people that were like, I just didn't like it, like it was a bit rubbish, blah blah blah. And I completely understand that now, because there's one plot twist which will make you like love it or hate it. Personally, I absolutely loved it because it was just such a random thing to happen, but I also kind of understand why people wouldn't like the plot twist. If you are new to reading thrillers, Riley Sager is a really good author to start with as well. Next up is Hidden Pictures by Jason McCurlack. So this is like a horror thriller, and it follows a nanny called Mallory. She goes to look after a really troubled child called Teddy, and he draws really weird pictures like this. It's kind of really creepy if I'm being honest. So this isn't like a horror book. Like if you don't like scary films and things, I wouldn't let that put you off. It's not like scary, it's just has some like horror themes. It's definitely more of a thriller. So Teddy's drawing all these really weird pictures, and the nanny Mallory is just trying to get to the bottom of it because she just doesn't understand why, coming from like a healthy family, his mind is warped to draw things like this. She just doesn't get it. I won't say too much more, but this was absolutely fantastic. I read this in one day and it got me out of one of the biggest reading slumps I've ever been in earlier last year. I just could not find anything that gripped me, and I read this and I was just like, thank you. Next up is The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. This was a book that I kind of picked up on a whim, and oh my god, I'm glad I did. So this follows Ted and Lily, who are 2 strangers. They meet at the airport going on an overnight flight from London to Boston. So the flight's a bit delayed, they end up sitting at the airport bar and having a few drinks, and Ted has a few too many and reveals that he is not in love with his wife anymore, the relationship's going stale, and he's pretty sure that she's cheating on him. He like sits there and jokes like, I could literally kill her, and then Lily kind of turns around and goes, well, I could help you if you want. I was just there like, so that's the premise of the book. Again, all of this just kind of happens in the first few pages, so there's no spoilers, but then where the plot kind of goes after that is just crazy. I think I actually enjoyed the first half of this book the most, which doesn't tend to happen, but I feel like the plot twist and kind of the build up to what was going on was almost better than the actual like reveals, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I still really enjoyed it, and this is one for those who want like a bit more of a sophisticated read. So like Freida McFadden's books are quite like simple reads, and this was a bit more of a sophisticated read, kind of like Karen Slaughter vibes if you've read any of her work. So the next book is another book that I read on Kindle, and it's called Drowning by T.J. Newman. This is one of the most fast-paced books I've ever read. You open the book and you are literally like bang in the action from page one. It's one of those stories that kind of starts just in the middle of everything as opposed to at the beginning. So if you're looking for something that just kind of hots up right from literally the very first sentence, this is going to be a great book for you. So this follows a plane crash in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and then it focuses on 8 or so people who decide to stay on board the plane as it's sinking, as opposed to getting off and like risking all the gas from the plane exploding on them. It's just really, really intense, and I actually read this whilst I was flying on like a long haul flight, I think from Vietnam back to the UK, and I understand that that is kind of like psychotic, but that's just who I am. I was actually so moved by this book as well. Like I was genuinely rooting for the characters. Like I did kind of probably tear up a little bit at the end. It was quite emotional towards the end of it. This is a thriller that will literally keep you gripped, and if you're anything like me, maybe tear up at the end as well. I gave this one a straight 5-star as well. Next up is Dark Matter, which is like a sci-fi thriller. This follows Jason, who wakes up in the back of a car. He's been kidnapped and taken away from his family. So he manages to like kind of escape, and then his wife and son have no idea who he is, and it turns out he's been transported to a different parallel universe. So stay with me. As I said, this is a sci-fi thriller. The concept sounds more sci-fi than it is. It's more of a story of like the power of like love and family, and also with the thriller aspects of kind of obviously like themes of unaliving and themes of like struggle. It's just absolutely fantastic. This is like one of those books that just does everything. It just has everything. So the actual story arc follows Jason's tense journey with multiple universes as opposed to just one singular parallel universe. So this book absolutely read like a movie. I'd be very surprised if this doesn't get adapted into a film, or if it hasn't already and I'm just clueless, because it really did read like the plot of like a really gripping like film you would go and see at the cinema. It was also really thought-provoking as well. I was kind of sat there questioning some of my own choices that I've made in life, and like just like bigger themes. I couldn't really fault the ending either, so again, this was just an immediate 5-star. I think this is a book that everybody has to read, even if it's not your typical genre. I feel like it's just such a simple sci-fi thriller read, as opposed to some of the others that are a lot more complicated. Everybody can kind of get on board with this one. Next up is What Lies Between Us by John Marrs. This is arguably my favourite book of 2023. I absolutely loved it. So this book follows a woman who has her elderly mum chained up in the attic of their house, and it's told from both perspectives of the woman who's put her there and also the lady who's chained up. Everyone says like, oh, this book has a good plot twist, etc. about other books, but this book literally had a plot twist every 50 pages. I was enthralled. I literally couldn't put it down, like at all. I was just so taken by this book, absolutely wholeheartedly taken by it. John Marrs is amazing at really making you believe in the characters as well, so I was like questioning both of their decisions at the same time. It was just so good. John Marrs is just such a fantastic author. I also enjoyed Keep It in the Family, but this is my favourite book of his by far. So next up we have another Frida McFadden book. This one is called Never Lie. This is definitely another one of Frida's better books. I was absolutely gripped by this one. I'd say this is definitely in my top 3 that she's written, and I've read 15 plus of theirs. So this follows a married couple who just bought the house of their dreams. They've moved to the suburbs and they're just like so happy, they're so in love, everything's going amazing. And then they get trapped in the house just pretty much as they've moved in, just as they bought it, in a snowstorm, and they are stuck for days. It's one of those houses that's like down like a really long track, of course it is, and then like no one can kind of get in and out to even like check on them. They can't get the car out, they are literally just trapped. So they're kind of stuck there like with literally no food or anything, and then they decide to like check the cupboards and there is food there. So they're thinking, well, how can I have just bought this house? There's no one living here. Or is there? So like weird things start happening, paintings start moving on their own, and they're just like so spooked out, they're like, we don't even want this house anymore, and it kind of just goes from there. When I finished this book, I was literally just like, I can't even comprehend what's just happened. Like it was all that good at the end. I really enjoyed this one. I think this is a lot of people's favourite Frida book, and yeah, it's definitely mine. This is also a really quick read, like it's very easy to read, like her writing style, and also it's quite a short book, and it has quite short chapters as well. So then we have another Riley Sager book. This one's called The Only One Left, and I absolutely loved this book as well. So this one's very atmospheric. It's set in like a really big mansion on like a cliffside that's quite secluded, and it's also set in the 80s. It follows a care worker, Kit, who goes to look after a suspected unaliver called Lenora Hope. She was quite notorious back in the day, but now she's paralysed and she can't talk. So when Kit's looking after her, she kind of like starts to connect with her, and she wants to tell her version of events through a typewriter because obviously she can't speak. This book reminded me a lot of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo if it was set as a thriller. So they're both kind of similar in having somebody who's like older age, they've got a big story to tell, they don't really know how to tell it, so they're doing it in like a unique way, and it kind of unfolds at a similar pace. This is my favourite Riley Sager book. It is a new release and it only came out in 2023, but I just absolutely loved it. This book just delivered twist after twist. Riley Sager is so good at that, and these twists were just incredible. Finally, number 10 is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. I actually originally bought this book because I loved the cover so much, like it's absolutely gorgeous, and then I read it and I was like, oh my god, the book is literally just as good as the cover. So this follows Chloe, who's now a practicing psychologist. However, 20 years ago when she was little, her father was committed but being a serial unaliver. It's now 20 years later and he's about to get out of prison, but then the unaliving start happening again. This is like a really well developed novel, and also it was Stacey Williams' first book that she actually had published, which is just incredible. This just had great characters and a great story, and I think my love of psychology may bias me slightly in this because she was literally like a practicing psychologist, but I still recommend it anyway. So there's 10 engaging and entertaining thriller books that you absolutely have to read this year. Please let me know in the comments if you do read any of them or you've read any of them already, because I'd love to chat about them some more. If you'd like to check out my favourite books of last year, both physical and Kindle editions, I will link the videos now, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time!